At the November 2023 commission meeting, commissioners asked staff to work with stakeholders to determine if rulemaking could address stakeholder concerns regarding the minimum cash on hand requirements for house bank card room. We have gone ahead and worked on that at the March 2024 commission meeting. Commissioners authorized initial rulemaking to amend WAC 230-15-050 and create new rules. Those new rules and amended rules are included in your packet, but the highlights of those rules are to allow specific prizes to be paid by check, to allow for changes to the formula for determining the minimum amount of cash to be required in the cage, requiring card game licensees to exchange chips for cash unless the player requests payment by check, and requiring house bank card room licensees to have sufficient funds to pay fixed base prizes. Since the March 2024 meeting, we have held a public feedback session on April 16th, where several individuals expressed their support for the changes to the minimum cash on hand requirements. And that support was largely centered around safety concerns for both staff of the card rooms and the patrons that may be carrying around a large winning prize. At this time, staff is recommending filing the attached rule language for further discussion.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Yes.
One, so this, I really appreciate the perspective of somebody wins big prize. If they're amenable to it, the licensee can choose to write them a check within 24 hours. And I think that we ought to kind of offer that same level of choice to the player. So, or, you know, at least we can have this conversation. But for me, if somebody, you know, has multiple wins in smaller or medium-sized pots or jackpots or whatever that don't meet this threshold, and maybe they've got $10,000 all of a sudden, you know, that they're due. It seems to me that if it's their choice to have a check or a wire transfer or a ACH or whatever method of transferring that money into their checking account or giving them a check, that the player should have that, by rule, should have that option as well. So I don't know staff-wise what we would need to do here to make that modification, but it seems to me that kind of consumer protection, player protection would be good to address in this rule.
Absolutely.
Easy.
So, Tina Griffin for the record, and we have our subject matter experts that's been helping Adam out, Jess Luce, who is now Special Agent Supervisor. So I think if we take a look, and just what are your thoughts, and Adam, you may want to consider this as well. If we take 230-15-050, and in the first line here, in the first sentence, say how, right now it says, however, the licensee may write a check for the balance of chips redeemed, but only at the request of a player. I think what I'm hearing you say is you would, you're thinking that it should say, however, the licensee must write a check for the balance of chips redeemed, but only at the request of the player.
If requested.
But only if requested by the player. And then the licensee must issue the check within 24 hours.
If, or ACH or wire transfer, whatever, but
Oh, so you want to take this into wire transfers and other sorts of electronic payment methods?
if the player chooses
Okay.
one of those forms of redeeming their cash rather than physical cash, I'm open to having that conversation I don't know what the pros and cons necessarily would be of opening it up to those other methods of payment. I like the time frame. I just want to, through this, give the player the choice to receive their funds in an alternative fashion other than just cash in their pocket when they walk out.
And an alternative fund to a check as well.
Sure.
Okay, and just initially, I think one consideration that we have not had conversations about is any wire transfer fees and who would bear the costs of any fees associated with initiating a wire transfer, or any other fees associated with transferring of funds through electronic mechanism. So it sounds like we can certainly take those back. It sounds like that's going to be more expensive than what we could address with a change here today.
I mean, we could, I mean, if everybody's kind of ready to go with this right now, we can do that in a separate rule. I'm fine. I don't want to necessarily, if this is,
Well, I think it would change things. We would have to still refile the 102. Would you not agree? Because
this is at 102 right now.
yes, so we can hold it over until July and work on that. Terry, is it okay if just,
Yeah, I can't tell he with his hand raised or, yeah,
In the far left corner, teeny
Oh.
tiny.
go ahead, Jess.
Hi, Jess Losi for the record, with the Regulation Enforcement Unit. So I think our rules do address checks in general, Commissioner. Besides what Director Griffin just described, we have several other rules as far as different types of jackpots, and we always give the player the ability to request a check for the full amount. We also want to make sure if the player wants to receive cash that they have that option as well, because they're using cash to buy in on tables. But I think all our rules now at least cover checks. So if a player wins any type of jackpot or is in general gameplay, like you noted, where they're winning maybe $100, $1,000 at a time, and now have built up to $10,000, like your example, these rules would give them the ability to go to the cage and potentially request a check. Outside of checks, like Director Griffin said, we haven't addressed that at this point in this rule. But I do think we're at least covering checks and giving the players that option. So just wanted to throw that out there for consideration.
I could follow up on that. So, and I guess for Tina or Jess or Adam, I mean, there may be more policy considerations in these alternatives, whether it be, and I don't know if an ACH and a check are the same thing in a practical sense. And then wire transfer is certainly a different thing. So the big thing for me is, at a minimum through this process, is I do want the licensee to have an obligation to write somebody a check. So the way I'm reading it, it says that they may write a check if the person that's being paid is asked for it, if they want a check. So, it seems to be more of a when you win one of these types of jackpots. So I'm concerned that it doesn't address general gameplay and a player option to receive a check. So I'm open to being pointed out where it does do that. And then again, if the ACH and wire transfer are kind of different policy discussions, I'm fine with maybe breaching that another time.
Yeah, I think with that subsection 1 that Director Griffin brought up, one of our concerns had to do with whether players did not want checks at all. And they're using cash to buy in on tables. And let's say they buy in for $10,000 in cash. And now when they go to the cage, they want to receive cash back. And there was a concern that if the card room could just always write checks and not provide the player cash, which was a method of payment they used. So that's why we put in that rider saying that if the player requested a check, the card room could do it. But maybe there's some other language we can use to kind of encompass what you're looking for as well.
Mr. Patterson?
Based on what I'm just hearing today, what's wrong with the language in that section? Licensees must exchange chips brought to the cashier's cage by players for cash. However, the licensee, instead of the word may, put the word must, write a check for the balance of the chips redeemed, comma, and then eliminate the words but only. So it would then say at the request of the player. So that way they are required to write a check if the player requests it. They're not required to if the player doesn't request it, but only if they do. But
I mean, it seems like it accomplishes the only thing. Yeah, because that's not talking about specified types of jackpots. That's somebody coming to the cat
yeah,
cage with a handful of chips. And I mean, I guess the only other concern, I mean, are there any money laundering concerns or issues with this type of
with,
policy change?
I'm not following that.
Well, I'm just, is there, somebody shows up with a bag full of cash, goes and plays for a half hour, and they came back and now they want to check. Let's say it's under 10,000. If we don't know where the course of where their bag of cash came from.
That happens now.
Right, I know it happens
This
now.
isn't going to
Right.
change that in any capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, the AML requirements for the card rooms still exist, and this, in the format in which they receive their money at the cage, that's not going to impact the AML compliance requirements.
Excellent. That's a good answer. Excellent.
So I'll put forth an amendment if you guys want to go forward with this.
Well, Commissioner Ibsen had a comment.
Oh,
or a few
excuse me.
things.
Sure. Just a clarifying question. Just in general, if we're moving more in that direction of checks in lieu of cash as an option, can you just tell me how we're going to verify that there's sufficient liquidity in these establishments' bank accounts?
Yes. Jess, do you want to touch on that?
Our agents go into the field and we do periodic reviews of the card room's accounting records, including their bank statements, especially for larger jackpots. But this would be part of our regulatory program to verify that they're maintaining sufficient amount of cash on hand in their accounts as well, so they can cash out these players appropriately. So,
The periodic audits, snapshot in time. Okay, thank you.
correct.
Thank you. And then I'll go ahead and get public comment on this discussion, and then maybe we can discuss the amendment. Is there any public comment? Yes, please come up to the podium and state your name and who you're with.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brooke Davies. On behalf of Maverick Gaming, just wanted to make a brief comment based on Commissioner Sizemore's suggestion, just to ask you all to potentially consider, understand maybe Wire does have fees that would take more consideration, but at least consider the ACH option. It essentially is an electronic check, and I think that, you know, it would actually, there'd be no holds on it. Some people wouldn't have to make that extra trip to deposit it. So just for public safety reasons, just asking for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments on this? Let's see any hands. All right. Do you want to just as a possible amendment or?
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment to the proposed rule. The amendment in 230-15-050 would replace in line 5 would replace the word may with must, and it would eliminate the words but only. And the effect of the amendment would be that if a player wants to be redeemed with a check, then licensees would have to do that if they ask for it. That's what I think it does. Maybe Suzanne.
Like it.
This is some of that amendment, but I believe I'm following what you're saying. Did you also strike the language? Sorry. We're passing the microphone around. Did you also strike the language regarding at the request of the player?
No,
Okay, so it was just the but only.
no, we want at the request of the player there.
I would
Yes.
agree that would be how I'm understanding your intent. So, thank you.
Place may with must
Yeah.
and
Get rid of-
strike, but only
Yes.
in that first paragraph.
All right, so you're making a motion with that amendment to the
To-
language.
I would second that to move forward with that amended language.
Oh,
Well, it's not.
No. We're going to vote on
so we're moving forward with the amended language.
it. It hasn't been amended until it's been voted on. The action of amendment hasn't occurred yet.
That's what we're voting on. It's just the language, so we're voting on amended language, isn't that?
I defer to you, Madam Chair.
We're
We're not taking final action.
not taking final action, we're just,
Moving it forward.
We're just wordsmithing.
yeah.
Okay,
And it's gonna require a new 102.
you're right.
So
Yes, so this is prior to filing language, and so at this stage, what you're looking to do is just amend the language that's currently in front of you and vote to approve to file the CR 102 with your amended language.
And no formal action for amendments.
No, but you will need to make it clear to staff what language you are moving forward with the CR 102 language.
Can't you just let me have one amendment? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table with the amended language of taking out may, adding must, and removing but only. So do we have a second?
I seconded it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Okay, where are we?
If I may, real fast before we move on, I just want to make sure we have the exact language read into the record. So subsection 1 is going to read, card game licensees must have sufficient cash on hand to redeem all chips issued for play. Licensees must exchange chips brought to the cashier's cage by players for cash. However, the licensee must write a check for the balance of the chips redeemed at the request of the player. Licensees must issue the check within 24 hours.
Yes.
Works for me.
And so a second motion, if you choose to, is still necessary to then file this language.
Okay. What do we have?
So you get your.
Yes,
That was.
here we go. Wow.
Okay, so do we have a?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the draft language for minimum cash on hand for further discussion as presented by staff and as amended.
Second.
All right, been moved and seconded to move forward the amended language. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.